So we're gonna go ahead and get started. You're good on recording? All right. So we're actually trying something new this year, so just bear with us as we switch. We gotta turn things on and off, but anyways, next up, we're gonna finish off the day with Dr. Scott Shearer first, and then we're gonna have a little panel discussion for about a half hour to round off the day, talking a little bit more about this target spraying, excuse me. But we'd ask Scott to come and talk and give us a little bit of a glimpse about what's going on in wireless connectivity, thinking about the future, because as Jenna mentioned, or she wasn't in here, but part of the solution to some of this is you're gonna have to have connection to make it work. Okay, and so as we think forward, connectivity not only being important, but the challenge today as we move along around Ohio's landscape is, are we connected in all places? Not yet. And so that's where a lot of our counties are really focused on building out rural broadband or making that available. But it's going to be key here as we see more of this autonomy and ultimately robotics come to Ohio. We're going to have to be connected. So with that, Scott, we'll turn this over to you and I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. I'm going to kind of go in reverse order. What I'm going to try to do is build the case for wireless connectivity, and then we're going to talk, and we're going to go through some of the attributes that you need to be thinking about when we think about wireless connectivity. So with that, I do this a little bit better. I'm going to kind of pick up, in some respects, where Jenna left off, okay? And so I'm going to roll forward a little bit, and Jenna talked a lot about some of the things that might be coming, but I also want to get you thinking about, it doesn't like me, John.
Keep talking.
Oh, it rolled over? Yeah. All right, sorry about that. Worked once.
Now try it.
There we go.
All right.
All right. So, one of the devices Jenna was talking about, See and Spray, is using something we call convolutional neural networks. Now, I'm not going to get real deep into this, but the important aspect of it is that you put an image in this side over here, you have several convolutional layers, mathematical operations, you're extracting features. You get over here and you have these connected layers that allow you to classify what it is in the image, okay? And that's kind of what's driving all this. These convolutional neural network classifiers, you can download them off the internet pre-trained. Okay, and that's what a lot of these companies are doing. Then what you do is you strip out the softmax layers on the output side and you retrain it to your application. In the case of agriculture, in the case of See and Spray, it's learning to recognize those weeds within the rows. Okay. The reason why I want to get you thinking about this a little bit is, while we're using it for these applications with spraying, we're also going to be using it for a lot of other things as time goes along. So we'll get you thinking about some of these cases. I was at a farm show. Farmer came up to me. This is in early February. Says, Dr. Shearer, great stock tip. I said, I don't give stock tips. No, it was phenomenal. 2 years ago, you told me to buy NVIDIA stock. He goes, best decision I've ever made in my life. What's up next? What should I be buying next? You got to remember, this is right before NVIDIA stock ran up 17%. Okay. NVIDIA now, because of artificial intelligence, because of the graphical processing unit, is now worth more than Alphabet is. Okay, ran up, I don't know, what was it, $30-some billion in one day when it went up 17%. So he's looking at me like I'm going to give him what the next hot tip is or whatever. And I go, I don't give stock tips. Okay, I only regret that I didn't listen to what I was telling this guy and invest myself. Okay, but NVIDIA is kind of pushing a lot of this right now. They have a sizable portion of the market. Everybody's speculating on how much AI is going to change everything we do. Okay. Jenna talked about See and Spray. I'm not going to talk about See and Spray other than to get you thinking about how this product might be used in other applications. Okay. Jenna kept talking about use cases, and I think that's great because that's what I like to talk about. I honestly believe for these camera-driven, AI-driven, graphical process unit-driven products, if you will, for Ohio farmers, there's probably 200 use cases. Okay, let me give you some examples. Let's say you got intensively managed wheat and you're going through the field and you notice in some locations the stand isn't quite that great. At the right time of year, you can what? Give it a shot of nitrogen, promote tillering. Okay, there's a use case. When that stand isn't great enough, maybe we put on a little bit more nitrogen. Tillage operations. Okay, think about adjusting tillage tools automatically to leave a certain amount of residue on the soil surface. Okay, and I'm just trying to give you a few examples of where I think things are headed. I'm talking to a well-known soil fertility individual in the state of Ohio. We got to talking about, can we use this to apply phosphate fertilizers in soybeans late in the season? And we might be doing that at the same time we're applying fungicides. So there's going to be a lot of uses of this technology. Deer, first to market, no question about that. I'm not going to argue with that. Here's an interesting one, Bosch and BASF. What's BASF? A chemical company. If you stop and think about why would BASF be interested in a market that's going to reduce what they sell? Does that make any sense to you? I got one word, Kodak. Okay, everybody remembers Kodak, right? What happened to Kodak? That digital image stuff's never going to catch on, right? Okay, so maybe BASF sees where things might be headed in some respects. And by the way, chemistries might change with this technology as well. And that's one of the things I alluded to earlier. By the way, this is supposed to be in the US this year sometime. I don't know whether it's going to be selling it or not, but it will be in the US. Here's another one, Green Eye Technology, and this is out of Israel. Okay, they now have headquarters in Lincoln, Nebraska. Okay, so another company. The third one, Bilberry out of France. Trimble just bought Bilberry. I know this product is going to be in the US this year as well. I don't know whether they're going to be marketing it yet. But again, a lot of similar elements in all these products. I put this up there because my son works for FarmWise. Okay, this is a robotic cultivator. So it's kind of hard to tell. This is a 3-bed machine, 60-inch beds. If you look over here, there right there is a lighting, vision, and artificial intelligence system. And what it's doing as you go through the field is it's basically identifying the weeds between the rows of crops, but also between individual plants. These are hydraulically actuated shovels or spades or whatever, and these go crossways back and forth as you go through the field to eradicate the weeds between plants. Okay? Anybody want to guess what that machine costs? Huh? Guess what that thing costs?
$2 million.
Yeah, you're a little bit high. It was $1 million. Okay? They sold 2 of them last year. They sold another 2 or 3 so far this year. They're getting ready to ship, I think, 2 more. This plays well in California because obviously one of the alternatives is what? Humans, hand weeding, which if you've done that very often or whatever, that's not a lot of fun. So anyways, kind of an interesting time, but AI is going to drive a lot of different things, and that's what I'm trying to get people to think about. Deere announced this. We'll get a little bit closer to autonomy. They have 3 stereo vision systems on the front of that weight bracket. That's what made that John Deere 8R tractor autonomous. Okay, I know that these aren't for sale yet. Maybe Jen knows a lot more than I do, and that's fine. She'd probably speak to them. But I know that they had a number of these units out in test last year doing a fall tillage, primary tillage. Okay, when you look at that system, it's out on the front of the tractor for collision avoidance. Here, it's on the back of the tractor to kind of keep in check what's happening with the tillage tool. Okay, but those are stereo vision system, a little bit different than single camera. Autonomy in agriculture. Hey, has anybody been paying attention to the tractor horsepower war? Huh? Watch Commodity Classic? You know, what C&H Industrial comes out with their 715 horse, and then Deere comes out with their 830 horse. Okay. Now, I just look at things and I project what's going to happen. Okay. Deere is now manufacturing an 18-liter diesel engine right there. Okay. How many horsepower is that going to go to? Anybody want to hazard a guess? I predict it goes over 1,000 horse. Okay. Will they have a 1,000 horse tractor? I guess it's going to be interesting. We'll wait and see. By the way, that cursor 16L, which C&H Industrial is using, that's Fiat powertrain. We know that goes to 780 horse right now, but will that go higher? I got to talking with the people from Great Plains about tillage tools. I said, you know, I hear this rumor about deer coming out with this high horsepower tractor, and then it happened. And I said, hey, what's gonna happen to tillage tools? And they go, what do you mean? And they said, first of all, we don't build one big enough. I said, okay, so farmers are gonna hook to your tillage tool that's not big enough, and what are they gonna do? Well, they're gonna pull it faster. I said, are the frames gonna hold up? It got really quiet in that conversation when that occurred, okay? So again, I call it horsepower wars, I call it tractor wars, call it whatever you want. I saw someplace, social media, the price tag on that Deere tractor, that 830 horses, about 1.34 million, if I'm not mistaken, okay? And that's understandable. I was at Agritechnica with a couple of my colleagues over here. I won't tell you what they were doing. I was very serious about what I was doing. Agritechnica is Germany, okay? You knew what they were out doing. You know what I was doing. I was there taking pictures to show. John and Ajay were out doing other things. They were sampling some of the local fare, okay? Took about 35 or 36 pictures of robots, okay? You know, we kind of see this as maybe a passing fad, and everybody's thinking, okay, maybe it's gonna happen, maybe not. No, I think it's here. Now, the question is, how many of those were concept vehicles versus how many of those are ready for market, okay? I'm gonna come back and talk about autonomy because I want to get you thinking about some things. Because when we talk about autonomy, people throw that word around maybe without really understanding what it means, okay? By the way, this is a Kubota tractor. I'm gonna come back and talk about some Kubota stuff. That's marketed in Asia right now, and it's fully autonomous. So things are happening outside of the US, not just in the US, okay? So let's go through levels of autonomy. Level 0, by the way, I stole this from the Society of Automotive Engineers, but you know, do they know much about tractors? So I changed some wording in there to kind of make it tractor specific, okay? Level 0, no driving autonomy, requires full control of the equipment. Operator, as the field machinery, has no support system. You got to have a human on it. Human's going to control all functionality of the machinery, okay? Level 1 involves basic assistance. Typical level 1 equipment has ground speed control, light bar guidance. The operator's still in the loop, okay? In the case of light bar guidance, the operator's still doing the steering, but they're getting some assistance from looking at the light bar out on the hood, okay? We were here when? Back in the mid-90s, when GPS became widely available with differential corrections and some things like that. Level 2 corresponds to semi-autonomous driving. At this level, the vehicle utilizes automated guidance to cross fields in straight or predefined paths. Auto steer, right? Or automated guidance. So when you got to think about these levels of autonomy, we're moving along this scale, okay? I will argue that John Deere tractor that's autonomous, what really allowed it to go from a driver sitting in the seat to a driver remotely monitoring was a collision avoidance system, okay? So it's a progression. Level 3 defines the moment when the onboard system can take over all operating function, but only in certain situations, okay? However, the equipment operator must remain at the monitor control station all the time and be ready to take over. This is kind of like what? Automated guidance with end of row terms, okay? But we all know when you click, I accept your terms, whatever the company is, you're assuming liability for the operation of that piece of equipment in automated mode, right? Everybody has to do that when they basically engage auto steer. Does everybody remember that warning that comes up? Comes up every time, doesn't it? It's reminding you that you're in charge, you're responsible, okay? That's level 3. Level 4 starts to get a little more interesting. It's fully autonomous experience, but with an operator monitoring and in control. Most of the time, the vehicle can drive on its own and will handle even complicated situations. During field activities, the operator can take care of other things and does not have to constantly observe the other equipment operating in the vicinity. Importantly, at level 4, vehicles will communicate and inform each other about maneuvers and coordinated activities, combines unloading on the go. Okay, so we're starting to see some of these products, such as AutoCart. Okay, and a number of manufacturers have things at different levels. Level 5, Okay, and this is true autonomy. Everything up to this point has either been human controlled or supervised autonomy, where the human is still in the loop. But we get to level 5, vehicles are truly self-driving. They operate autonomously in all conditions. There is completely no need for a human to take any action. It is believed that such equipment will be void of features to support human operators. You notice most of the robots that I showed you pictures of, no cabs. Okay, why would you outfit it for a human if the human's not going to be on it operating? Now, still got to move it up and down public thoroughfares or move it between fields. Okay, which is one of the problems we're going to continue to deal with. Example: controlled environment, cabs, working lights, suspension, etc. You probably don't need a tractor with suspension if you don't have a human operator. I'm not saying it's not easy on the equipment, but you know, the Europeans went to a lot higher travel speeds with their equipment. A lot of their tractors actually have 4-wheel suspension on them. Here in the US, we're still really suspended on the front axle and not fixed on the rear. Okay. There's an international company or group that put together this, and they call it Global Ag Tech Initiative, Boldly Grow Your Path to Autonomy. And I think companies like Trimble are talking about this path to autonomy as well. Ultimately, I think the real question is, who's going to assume liability? When do you as a farmer need to go out and get insurance? Okay. I know that you're going to insure your equipment against loss and things of that nature. But again, when do you start insuring your equipment for autonomous operation? Okay. And somebody is going to have to assume that risk. Okay. I don't think there's any question about that. I like this graph. This came out of the military, and you know, in the service, they have a lot of people controlling drones, but generally a pilot will be controlling multiple drones from halfway around the world. Now, that brings up a couple different things when we're talking about flying drones. I'm going to come back to this in terms of the wireless connectivity. What we look at is what's called the optimal level of autonomy. Okay? It's not going to be full autonomy, and it's not going to be fully manual. It's going to be somewhere in between. Okay? And that's going to continue to shift to the right as we learn more about these systems, as they continue to evolve. I've told this story before. My son and his wife were in San Francisco, and they took one of the automated cabs. Got in, sitting in the back seat, nobody in the front seat. They shot a video. Dead silence in that car. Car takes off, goes a few blocks. Somebody steps off the curb into a crosswalk painted on the street. Car slows down, stops. People proceed in front of the car. Car speeds back up. My son and my wife say virtually nothing to one another. Okay? Sitting in the back seat, they couldn't do anything anyways. The reason why I'm talking about this is on-highway situations are very controlled situations. You got lanes to drive in, you got stoplights, you got traffic signs, you got all those things that guide how human operators control their vehicles. It is somewhat predictable what the other human operators are going to do. Agriculture, all bets are off. Okay? None of the fields are standard, not standard shape, standard size. Crops are all different, all stages of growth. You think about trying to design for autonomy in an agricultural setting, totally different ball game, if you will. Much more complex. Okay? So again, I think full autonomy is a ways off yet. Molly Cairn Agricultural Center. Matt and Nick, don't listen to this, Nate. Andrew got this tractor running, and this is on the east end of the Farm Science Review static display site. This is a Kubota M5 with a Spondo automation package on a 15-foot batwing mower. I drive over and I'm shooting this video, and I'm looking around, I can't find Andrew. So I get done shooting my video, and I'm thinking to myself, man, where's he at? Andrew's the guy that started up the tractor, monitoring it, operating it. Called on his cell phone. He goes, yeah, what do you need? I said, hey, I'm over here watching this tractor mow this parking lot. I said, where are you at? He goes, I got the thing running. Seemed like it was doing okay. I'm over here on the North Farm. I got work to do. Okay. He's still monitoring it and has some obligations there, but I'm also beginning to think about how are we going to protect these fields? Dee Jepson was here a little bit ago talking about safety. And one of the things I've been talking to Dee Jepson about is what are we going to have to do to manage our liability when we have this equipment autonomously operating in the field. One of the realizations we came to is we're going to have to post these fields if there's a robot in there operating, much as you would re-entry on spray after spray application for human workers. Okay, so again, there's going to be some things we're going to have to work through. I've been telling, there was a couple from Australia that's trying to bring Swarm Farm, their autonomous sprayer, into the U.S. Jossie, I'm sorry, and Andrew Bate. And anyways, they called me up, or we exchanged emails, and then they came to Columbus. But in exchanging the emails, they said, what are the rules in the US? And I said, outside of California, I said, really, it's kind of like the wild, wild west. There are no rules. You can't operate on a public thoroughfare. But the other side of the coin is there's really nothing governing how you operate on your own fields or even fields that you're running or leasing. Okay. So there's going to need to be some evolution here, and it's going to come, but it's going to take a little time too. Sorry about that. That's the bottle automation package. You can put it on one of 3 tractors, they have an M5, a Fence 700, and they're making it for one of the E-Series Deere tractors. It'd be one of the compact, I believe compact diesels, but one of the hydrostats, okay? Molly Caron Agricultural Center, this was during the Farm Science Review. We had another Kubota M5. It has a cab on it now, but we really didn't need it. It was just available. So we dropped that Sabano automation package on there. That is a Great Plains Terramax 10-foot tillage tool. And, you know, if you stop and think about it, tillage is one of those things that you could relegate to an autonomous tractor like this. The nice thing about tillage is once you plant the field, you really don't know what happened tillage-wise for the rest of the growing season. On the other hand, if you're using this autonomous tractor to plant the field and the tractor messes up, you see it all growing season long, right? And all your neighbors see it too, okay? So as we see these applications, we're gonna start out doing tillage because it's an easy thing. Spraying is one of the next natural ones. And I talk about Swarm Farm in Australia. They get 54 autonomous sprayers out, okay? Generally low power. They're selling the machines, the base machine, for about 170,000 a piece. And I had some estimated spray cost exclusive of fuel and chemical of about $1 an acre. Okay. Now they're fallow in Australia, so they're always trying to kill green vegetative material. But the other thing is they love letting those robots go and cover those fields multiple times when that ground is laying fallow. Okay. The machine I just showed you and this one have something in common. They're connected using Verizon. Okay. Why these companies chose Verizon, I have no idea. My guess is they probably chose Verizon because of its prevalence in the Midwestern part of the US and where their anticipated markets are. This is 360 Rain. I call it a robotic high clearance irrigation machine. More appropriately, it's a robotic high clearance nutrient applicator. What do I mean by that? The people that created Precision Planting sold that company off, and they went back and reformed 360 Yield Center. This is one of their products that has gained a lot of noteworthy attention. Okay. This machine has about 3,000 foot of hose on a reel. It reels it out in the field, does not drag the hose through the field. It reels it out in accordance with how the field was planted. You actually put a GPS receiver on the planter to record the planting path. So you can go back and operate this machine behind it. Okay. Everybody goes, well, just use GPS receiver on the tractor. That doesn't work because the planter wanders around behind the tractor. Okay. And I've watched this thing. We had it out at Farm Science Review. We had Guy in the Water ran over the same spot probably a dozen or more times. Man, it was impressive how close those blue strips of water, if you will, laid over the top of one another each time. Okay. This machine doesn't quite have the speed, but it is internet connected. So this is on the web user interface, not unlike the Sabano machine. Blue things are where the machine's been out, irrigated on the way out, irrigated on the way back. Green one is irrigating on the way out, but it follows the path in which the field was planted. Field size and shape make no difference. How you plant it makes no difference. This is something you come in and do after the fact. That 360 Rain can be moved between fields. You don't want to move it too far, and I'll tell you why here in just a second. But the black paths are the ones to be irrigated yet. Animal producers love this. If you think about it, what's happening is they're metering about 50 gallons a minute of manure into a water stream of about 150 gallons a minute. Now, dairy and swine farmers can apply animal nutrient sources all during the growing season. This is a game changer for the animal industry. I also believe very strongly that it's going to begin to impact water quality in a positive sense. In other words, instead of farmers going out and applying all their animal nutrient sources up front before they plant, now they spread them out over the season. They can get them out of that high rainfall, high precipitation time of the year where they're concentrated on the soil surface. Okay. By the way, give you a feel how fast the machine goes. Here it is picking the hose back up. It's a lightning 8 inches per second. Okay, maximum speed. It's kind of interesting. There's all these people kind of milling around the field, and I'm thinking, well, we probably need some traffic cones and chains. And then I'm thinking, if anybody gets run over by this thing. So anyways, that takes about 4.5 days to cover 160 acres. Okay, Andrew got this running. I always talk about Andrew. I talk about everything. He does all the work. Andrew gets called in the middle of the night. The machine's faulted out. Okay, now Andrew has to make a decision. Is he going to get out of bed and go out to the middle of the cornfield at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and figure out the machine stopped? Or is he simply going to look at images from the camera that are mounted on the machine and make a determination whether or not it's safe to restart the machine? Okay, this is what we call supervised autonomy. It's not the machine making a decision how it's going to respond. It's still a human in the loop making that decision. Okay, and this is where I see things headed probably for the next 5 to 10 years. Now, no doubt in my mind, Deere and all these other companies are going to continue to develop these AI systems. But one of the things I think everybody recognizes, to develop that intelligence takes a tremendous amount of images. I've been told, Jenny, you might be able to quantify this or whatever. I've been told that initially they trained that collision avoidance system on the Deere tractor with 40 million images. That means someone had to sit down and annotate those images so they could use them in the training algorithm. Okay, now, like I said, I don't know whether that's true or not. I was talking to some interns that ended up doing that for a summer. Okay,
It's probably right.
yeah.
There's more on the way, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, there is more on the way, but again, they're going to continue to develop the intelligence. But I want to get you thinking, it's not 100 images, it's not 1,000 images, it's not 10,000 images, okay? Not 100,000 images, you're probably into the millions of images to get AI intelligence, if you will, that is going to perform some of these functions. So what you're trying to do is make it robust so it works in a lot of different cases, okay? It's not trivial, but that's part of the reason why these data centers are going to be so important. That's part of the reason why connectivity is going to be so important. Okay, broadband connectivity. According to the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, definition of broadband, this is an older definition, but one I think is still in effect. 25 megabit per second download and 3 megabit per second upload. Now, it's problematic when we begin thinking about automating machines because most of our carriers have optimized for what? Download rates. Because you all want your streaming video, okay? And you get upset when you got to wait on that video to load. It interrupts your movie, right? Right, Ajay? Is that what happens to him that get upset with you? Yeah. Because you're sucking up the bandwidth, probably doing some artificial intelligence stuff, right? Okay. Now, 3 megabits per second is what is needed to run Zoom. So if you want to have any kind of continuity in a conversation, you need at least 3 megabits per second upload rate to make Zoom work in terms of video conferencing, okay? Broadband provides high-speed internet access via multiple types of technologies, including fiber, optics, wireless cable, DSL, and satellite. I kind of highlighted 2 of those because if you're in a tractor, your choices are very limited. You're not going to drag around what? Cable. It's just, you got to be thinking about connecting the machine, okay? The machine that's mobile. About 1.5 years ago, I got into a discussion between two dairy farmers about the best way to run Cat6 cabling in their barn. In my wildest dreams, I never thought I'd be in one of those conversations. And these dairy farmers were passionate about it. Their number one problem, rodents. Okay, and everybody saying, well, just put them in conduit. Okay, run a bunch of conduit around your farm. See how quickly that works out for you. Okay. Bandwidth requirements. Streaming video, 3 megabits per second download, and that's for SD, 5 megabits per second for HD. All right, now if I want to watch my machine in HD, and I want 3 or 4 video streams, I gotta have the same upload rate. Okay? So again, it's gonna be what the human operator of the machine needs, or the human in the loop needs to verify performance of that machine in the field. Maybe you don't need high def, maybe you only need images, but that's gonna unfold. Streaming music, 500 kilobits per second, that doesn't take much. Online gaming, 10 megabits per second. You know, they like those action figures that move real quickly, okay? Home security systems, 2 megabits per second. That's on a Ring doorbell. And then video conferencing, 2 megabits per second download and upload. Okay, so just some baseline numbers. This is my view of what's going to happen in the future in agriculture. Anything you do in agriculture has got to be internet connected. The sprayer goes into the field, John Deere, you hit their server, you download the intelligence for that day, for that crop, for that stage of crop growth, maybe for even the residue in the background. Okay. It could be for weather patterns up to that point in time because you're looking at for certain stresses in that crop in the field. Okay. But again, increasingly, it's going to be the connectedness of agriculture that's going to be important. We'll talk about latency a little bit because not enough people talk about latency. We talked about upload and download rates. That's great. You start autonomy though, and you're going to rely on it for safety. Latency becomes a much bigger issue. So what is latency? You got a laptop and you got a file server, but the question is, how do your signal get from the laptop to the file? And in many cases, back. Okay? If you're under 10 megabits, or I'm sorry, if you're under 10 milliseconds, pretty good. 20 milliseconds, not bad. When you start getting into the 120, 150, and so on, it can become problematic for a lot of these systems. We're fortunate in agriculture because we're not moving quite as fast. Okay? Under 30 milliseconds, little or no impact to the user experience. So if I'm a gamer, I got 30 millisecond latency. That's delay in the signal, not bad. 30 to 60 millisecond, okay, but noticeable for certain applications, gaming. Okay? Most acceptable is 60 to 100 milliseconds, but users don't start to feel it. Websites, a little slower, downloads not fast enough. Remember the old, dial-up copper lines? You wait forever for that file to download. It'd be halfway through and then it'd disconnect. Remember those days? I remember those days. Okay. 100 to 150 milliseconds. User feels typically the internet is slow. 150 milliseconds or greater. By the way, that's what? 150 milliseconds is 0.15 seconds. It works, but is not acceptable for most commercial applications these days. Okay. Get you thinking about why it takes so long for that signal to travel. Most of these things are going to be speed of light, right? If we got fiber, it's light in the fiber. Okay. And so to go from New York to San Francisco, light in fiber is about 21 milliseconds. Round trip is going to be 42. New York to London, 28 milliseconds or 56 for a round trip. New York to Sydney, 80 milliseconds or 160 milliseconds. Part of it's going to depend upon where these file servers are located. I was out at June's corporate headquarters and they were telling me that when they get to their autonomous equipment, they're going to do all the safety on the edge. So they're going to be doing the computing either on the machine or on the farmstead. And they get away from this, this delay, if you will, or this amount of wait time, if you will. Okay. A lot of things are going on in addition to the speed of sending that information over the fibers. Okay. By the way, were you paying attention where a bunch of the transatlantic fibers got cut here recently? We're trying to figure out who did it and how they did it. But that's been slowing down the internet and traffic between the US and Europe. There's a lot of other things though, because you have to organize the data to be sent. So you got serialization delays, you got queuing delays, there's packets, but you have to schedule the packets. And then there's switching delays. You know, whenever you go through any kind of switch, there's a delay associated with that switch and routing that. Mobile connection options, there's only two. Right now, there's two. There's wireless communications. Cell phone carriers are a good example of that. The other one's satellite. I think Deere has made the commitment to go with Elon Musk and Starlink, okay? And there's some great things with Starlink. Again, Starlink is optimized for download rates. Everybody wants their streaming video in rural America, okay? There's level 4 bandwidth, okay? A number of recent studies show that the adoption of autonomous vehicles will need a network connection with different characteristics, as their features will impose different quality requirements. In particular, a well-functioning autonomous vehicle is expected to require 10 megabits per second throughput and 1 millisecond of latency. Okay, now, admittedly, the cars are going faster. But again, there's a factor of 10. Maybe we only need 10 milliseconds latency in agriculture. But again, as we begin to connect these vehicles and they begin to rely on the actions and interactions between vehicles, that becomes important. Let's talk about where we've been, where we're at. Started out with 2G. Remember those days? 100 kilobits per second. Okay, lightning fast, right? Then we went to 3G, and we got up to about what was anywhere from about 384 kilobits per second to 2 megabits per second. And by the way, notice what's happening in latency too as we go through these different generations. 4G LTE, we got 150 to 450 millibits per second or megabits per second. I defy you to get that to a carrier today. We see that from Verizon, 4G LTE. I want to emphasize 4G LTE. We see that from any of the current carriers. I kind of doubt it, okay? And then there's 10 gigabit per second with 5G and 1 millisecond, okay? The T-Mobile people were out at Molly Cairn Agricultural Center and they went around. Everything there was 700 to 800 megabits per second download. I want to emphasize they always report download because those numbers are the highest. You tired of this yet? Maybe you're learning way too much about wireless communication, right? If nothing else, the take home today is we have different levels of autonomy, and we not only have to worry about download and upload rates. When we have internet connectivity, we got to worry about something called latency, okay? If nothing else, you get that out of my talk today, you'll be doing a great job, okay? One of the problems is the higher the frequency, the lower the latency, okay? And so we'll come back and talk about this a little bit, but there's a lot of things going on. We talk about low bands, mid bands, mid-band 1, mid-band 2, and high bands, okay? You got to remember the FCC controls all this, okay? And a lot of these wireless companies have bought certain parts of the spectrum in certain locations, and they own them. Have you ever watched these cell phone towers? I got to looking at these things, and they're kind of amazing. You realize in a lot of cases, multiple carriers are using the same cell phone towers. You'll see 3 sets of antennas, which means 3 different carriers are using the same cell phone tower. The one that got there first, their stuff is always on top because that gives them the greatest range, okay? Everybody else is subservient to them. But again, when you think about infrastructure, why not use infrastructure like this? We're starting to see 5G put on a lot of buildings too, especially in inner city areas. The problem, we go to 5G, we don't get the distance that we had with 4G LTE. So we need more towers, okay? So what's that mean for rural America? We're going to get 5G before we get 4G LTE? Okay. How long is it going to be until the entire state of Ohio has 5G? Good question. That's why I always ask the cell phone carriers, okay? We've committed to 5G across the entire state of Ohio. They didn't tell you what year they committed to it by. Is there anybody here from T-Mobile or Verizon? Yeah, I'm safe. By the way, there are a lot of different satellite options too. I think as I remember, we were at a corporate headquarters with Deere, they were investigating, I believe, 6 different satellite-based internet service providers. They ended up relying on Starlink or making that statement that they partnered with Starlink. My guess is Starlink has further deployed their system in comparison to a number of the others, okay? Everybody talks about LEO, low Earth orbit, if you will, but there's a Global Star, Global Star, Iridium, a couple of those. There's O3B mPower, Starlink, RTT. Then there's T-Mobile and SpaceX are beginning to team up. So there's a lot of things coming. The question is what can you use today? And do you wait? I'll just make that statement here. I think this was back in January when Deere announced that they had partnered with Starlink to form that partnership. I have a lot of fun. You get on the internet and check things out. I was wondering if I wanted access to Starlink, how would I get it? Go to Costco, okay? You can buy the antenna now at Costco. It's about $3,200. Oh, wait, it's out of stock, okay? So anyways, I know that there's going to be some of these challenges that plague the industry, but this Starlink is coming to fruition. These other carriers are coming to fruition, okay? I really want to get one of these because I want to put it out at Molly Care and I want to begin to compare Starlink to some of the other things that are available, okay? I show this one. This one's Verizon. I show it for a reason. This might be outdated. But if you need 5G and you're a farmer, it's great as long as you farm along, what, I-71? South and east and north and west. It's going to be challenging if you're looking for 5G from Verizon. I'll remind you the 2 companies that have the autonomous products in the marketplace right now. There's others, but the 2 that we have experience with, and that's 360 Yield Center using 360 Rain, and then Sabanto, that Sabanto automation package dropped on the Kubota M5. Those are both using Verizon cell phone modems, okay, for their connectivity. And I can tell you for both machines, when we lose connectivity, they stop. They do not start running again until we get connectivity again. One of the things that Sabanto did is they changed cell phone antennas. On the outside of the tractor, they changed the gain on the antennas, but they put 2 antennas on the tractor. So in an omnidirectional situation, they have better chance of holding lock on that Verizon signal, okay? So I want to talk about this next. Private LTEs, okay, and 5G, okay? The FCC has set aside the old citizen band radio frequencies, okay, CBRS. These are the 3.55 to 3.7 gigahertz. And these are all over the country, okay? These are unlicensed, okay? Anybody's free to use them provided you get approval, okay? And I'll talk about that. Covers more area per wireless access point than Wi-Fi. You get the signal out further, okay? Private LTE 5G's deployment. Private deployment spectrum license. I'll come back and talk about that license. It doesn't really, well, cost you a little bit to get it, but it's not really for the license necessarily. Does not require line of sight. Google, CommScope, Federated Wireless, and Sony provide the access to the 3.5 gigahertz. What you have to do is go hit their server and get permission to use those frequencies in a specific geographic location. By the way, that expires after a few days, and then you got to go back and get that permission again. Okay. But when I think about agriculture, you got to have many of your neighbors fighting you for those frequencies. Now there won't be. Okay. CoBank, who funds the cooperatives in the US, put this together. It was a white paper, and they're suggesting all their co-ops install 50 of these private 4G LTE networks to meet the needs of their customers. Quite likely, if the cooperatives follow this, the cooperative could become your new internet service provider. Okay. These are the components. There's 3 of them. There's Cobalt mesh node, there's a Topaz wireless access point, and then there's a file server. Okay. We installed these at Molly Care. Took about a day to do it. Nate and Matt and a few other people were very gracious to us and let us put it in out there. We have it operational in a day. The hardware costs about $13,000, okay? And we're up and running, and at Ohio State University, we're operating our own private cellular network. We have all the SIM cards, we have the eSIMs, we control upload and download rates, okay? In our case, we placed the wireless access point, I don't think this is working right here on top of the grain leg. And then there's the cell phone antenna that reaches out over an appreciable part of the Molly Cairn Agricultural Center. Right now, this is one hop. So we went from the farm office over to here, and then we get a lot of the coverage over there. We also have a cell phone antenna over at the farm office on the south side of 70, okay? But we're probably covering easily 70 or 80% of the Molly Cairn Agricultural Center. And we haven't really done too much fine tuning of the system. Okay, we got it up and operational and found out it was working. Went around and mapped our throughput, if you will, or upload and download rates. A lot of our upload and download rates over the majority of the farm were coming out at about 60 to 70 megabits per second. Okay, again, we're in control. Well, okay, Andrew's in control. He can kick me off the internet, okay, or the network in this case. But it is a solution for what's going on today. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that people might have, but hopefully this gives you a glimpse where things might be headed as we think about autonomy in agricultural production. I want to go back. We're either going to continue to buy big tractors, or we might automate and end up with a bunch of small tractors, and just thinking about that kind of dichotomy. Yes?
Is packet loss a concern?
Packet loss is a
Loss of
concern. Yep.
information?
Lots of information is concerned, but generally there's a lot of handshaking going on. So if you do lose those packets, they get transmitted again. Yeah. But once you lose those packets, it may cause that machine to fall out, in which case it's going to stop running. So you're right. It is important. Okay.
Scott,
Yes.
who's studying the social and economic impacts from this? I mean, farm size is definitely going to go to larger and larger farms. It might go all the way to International and John Deere being the only two farmers in the country.
Yeah. Bill's asking.
Facetious, but.
Well, Bill's asking who's studying this from a social impact. I see it this way, Bill, as we continue on the road we're on right now, in order to be more timely, farmers buy bigger tractors, right? Now, part of the problem with that is when they buy bigger tractors, they go out and look for more land to farm. Okay, so it's kind of a vicious circle. A lot of that's predicated on a human operator on the piece of equipment. Now, during the pandemic, we learned that we had a vulnerability in agriculture, though, because we couldn't find qualified workers. Okay. And again, if you got that big tractor and it's sitting in a barn, that really doesn't do you much good. I could be right or wrong, but I think if we automate, we might see the scale of equipment back off, which might be more favorable to smaller farmers. Okay. You know, Bill, I look at the combines that are coming out. An AFX or AF11. Okay. I've seen someplace where in good corn that'll shell 9,000 bushels an hour. Well, how many trucks do you have to have on the road for 9,000 bushels an hour? Okay. And that's what I keep thinking about. I'm even wondering if the farmers we have today are taking advantage of the harvest capacity they own. And so there's a lot of things going on, and I don't want to sit up here and say what's right or wrong, or what's going to happen or what's not going to happen. But I continue to think that if we automate, it might shift that size of equipment back to something a little bit smaller. And if it does, I think it favors smaller farmers. Okay. There's also a tremendous inventory of existing equipment out there. And I'll remind people, most of that equipment is going to have a 15,000 hour life. And we know farmers in the state of Ohio, using a number of those high horsepower tractors, only using about 300 hours a year. So if you do the math, that's 50 years that tractor, a lot of that equipment is going to be on farms. I think there's farmers going to continue to make money as they roll that equipment because their equipment costs are going to come down. So we're just not going to flip a switch and automate everything. It's going to be a progression. I think the big machinery manufacturers are very keen on what's happening. I think they're watching it very closely. I also don't think they're going to be the first into the deep end of the pool. Okay. I think it's going to be a lot of the startup companies. And then when it appears that you're beginning to encroach on market share, then we're going to see these companies by the startup companies, and that's the way they're gonna enter the automation market. All these companies have a lot of engineers vested right now in this automation. You know, that's why CNH Industrial bought Raven. That's the reason why Deere has bought Blue River, as well as Bear Flag Robotics and some other companies, okay? They're buying a lot of expertise that they might not have held as a company before. So it tells me it's real to them. Tells me it's not going away too. So, but great question. Thanks, Bill. Anybody else?
There have been much more, I think I heard you talk maybe a year ago, has been any more data or any advancement on robotic weed control
Robotic weed control.
during electricity zapping or pulling or whatever?
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 things I'm following, but I want to remind people, you know, there's Zasso, which is a company that CNH Industrial has part interest in. And they have electrodes, and the best way I'm going to characterize it is they're electrocuting the weeds, okay? We know there's a couple companies, robotic companies, if you will, that are directing laser energy, okay? And that works well if the weeds are small, okay? And I want to emphasize that. You got to be careful, because to kill a lot of these weeds, when they get big, you got to drive off a lot of moisture. That takes energy, okay? When they're small and they're controllable, these technologies will work. But again, we estimated one time, I think, for the Zasso to put it on a 120-foot boom sprayer was going to take a 600-horse diesel engine to generate the electricity for it. I think they were running about 25,000 volt potential, okay? So again, how do you kill the weed? If there was another method of action that did not require desiccating the weed or drying it out, then I think some of those things will probably become realistic. By the way, today with some of the technology, almost anything becomes an herbicide. Now I say that hot oil will kill these plants. So, you know, we got to be thinking about different ways in terms of different mechanisms of action. It's going to cause our weed scientists to rethink some of what they're doing too. So,
But there's multiple mechanical weed, robotic weeders on the market today.
Well, I'm thinking more from the line of looking at the future and just knowing what our consumer wants to purchase. Seems to be going more organic,
Yep.
more non-GMO.
Yep.
That's never gonna be the biggest share of the market, but it's 4% today, expected to be 8% within 10 years.
well,
That's a lot.
and the way things are going with the EPA, it might even
Might.
be more rapid. I say that a bit facetiously.
You're right.
One of the things is the market's going to dictate what a lot of farmers do in terms of the practices. I don't think there's any question about that. If it's profitable to use a laser device to kill weeds, farmers will buy and use it, okay? The robotic cultivators, I think, probably have a bit of space to mature yet and get to the point where they become a real bona fide solution. Competition is going to drive down cost. I think that's going to be important. The other thing that I've noticed is I watch all these AI-driven cameras for spray application. And I know there's some technology coming that's going to change it, but everybody's kind of stuck at 12 miles an hour right now. And so I keep wondering, why are they stuck at 12 miles an hour? Is it processing speed, or is it the spray nozzles speed of actuation? Okay. You got to remember that camera is kind of looking out in front of the boom a little bit, but it has to make that decision, and you got to actuate that spray nozzle pretty quickly, especially at 12 miles an hour to hit the weed. Okay. No doubt you can spray after the weed, but the question is, are you going to kill it? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry if you covered this already, but how are these wind machines powered?
Yeah, I'm gonna say the vast majority of these machines still rely on a diesel engine, whether they're electric or something else, okay? There is electrification coming, and I point to, Monarch tractor. Many of you may or may not realize there is some of Monarch technology has been commercialized by CNH Industrial. They have an interest in the company. When I was in Germany, I know Deere is working on electrification in tractors, okay? It's gonna be the smaller horsepower. We know that some of these companies pretty quickly are gonna be out of the market in California on low power tractors, because California is gonna demand under 30 horse to be electric, okay? So it is coming. One of the most heartening things that I know about, again, we keep talking about the size of battery, you know, a 500 or 600 horse tractor is gonna take a really big battery. There is one technology that's going to change that, and I'm starting to hear something about rapid recharging of these big batteries taking 5 to 6 minutes, okay? That could be a game changer. By the way, the machinery companies now, you can't make this stuff up. They're putting together charging stations for rapidly recharging batteries on electric tractors using diesel engines to drive the generators. The most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, but you gotta be careful because we know a lot of our farmers are not close to transmission lines or lines that are gonna carry the kind of currents necessary to fast recharge these batteries, okay? So even if they're gonna use them on any of their farm, they're gonna have to be able to use it on all their farm, okay? So it sounds kind of ludicrous or whatever, I know it sounds kind of odd, but it could be one of those stopgap solutions.
I'm just wondering if there's any kind of exchange for the solar farms and these operations and how they could somehow combine.
Yeah, so the questions about solar farms and how some of these operations get combined. John and I traveled to Germany, and I had an opportunity to listen to a gentleman talk about the future of the nutrient industry. Okay. This person said, and I don't know how right or wrong, John, you can put there too. He said the Haber-Bosch process is going away. And that got my attention because that's how most of our protein in this country is derived, be it animal or plant. The Haber-Bosch process is how we get our nitrogen fertilizer, okay? There are some technologies coming where they use electricity, water, and air to produce nitric acid, which is a nitrogen source for plants. Startup company out of California, Nitricity, is advocating for this, and they are advocating putting their manufacturing facility, their production facility at solar farms. It is conceivable our farmers could be going to solar farms to buy their nitrogen fertilizer in the future, okay? By the way, it's a great way to store energy when you don't need that electricity for something else, okay? So there's gonna be a lot of things that occur, and it's hard for me to predict what's gonna happen, okay? I'm not a big fan of solar. I'm not opposed to it. I'm a scientist, I'm an engineer, okay? I keep asking people, can we farm under the solar at the same time? We're just gonna have to think differently about some of these systems, okay? Great question though. Anything else? John, have I overstayed my welcome?